We live in an era of profound contradictions. While culture strives to portray women as independent, rational, and empowered, social media algorithms tell a different story. The most followed, liked, and desired profiles are those of men who display defiant confidence, sarcasm, selective insensitivity, and a raw masculinity that flirts with taboo. Public discourse demands sensitive men. The female unconscious continues to gravitate around the archetype of the charismatic predator. And in this clash between narrative and biology, an undeclared hypocrisy is born, lived daily, by them and by us. The truth that few dare to say is this: the modern woman is often attracted to what she herself claims to despise. And this attraction is not a flaw. It is a reflection of something much deeper. Biological programming, sexual selection, tribal rituals that still live within us, even covered by layers of civilization. Feminism has taught women to fight against historical oppressions, but it hasn't taught them to deal with their own fantasies. And it is in this vacuum that hypocrisy arises. The desire for power disguised as a search for care. The attraction to dominance masked by discourses of equality. The excitement provoked by mystery hidden behind phrases like, "I like sincere men." And here enters the common man, the one who listens, respects, strives to be what she says she wants. He molds himself to the discourse, but doesn't realize he's killing his own sex appeal. He becomes predictable, submissive, emotionally too available, and he pays the price for it. Meanwhile, the man who violates the rules, who defies the norms, who throws out the manual, is the one who, silently, dominates her imagination. The same one she denies in public and seeks in the silence of the early morning. Female desire is an underground language. It doesn't speak through words. It speaks through glances that linger a second longer, through the emotional response to the scent of a stranger, through the involuntary dilation of pupils in the face of behavior that modern discourse condemns. That's where the first trap lies. Believing what she says, not what she feels. Culture has taught men to listen, but it has forgotten to warn them. Desire doesn't manifest in the ears, but in the womb. And what is born in the womb cannot be negotiated with logic. She may say she wants a gentle, sensitive, partner-like man. But look at the real history. With whom does she get involved, surrender herself, submit herself? Rarely is it the gentle one, almost never the predictable one. Frequently, it's the unstable one, the confident one, the man who isn't begging for love, but who carries the certainty of being desirable. And here arises the internal conflict of the modern woman. She feels like a betrayal to herself, because she was taught to desire equality, but biologically responds to hierarchy. Because she was indoctrinated to value stability, but is excited by risk. Nature doesn't send flowers, it sends electrical pulses that ignore reason. And it is this duality that creates the theater of hypocrisy. To understand this contradiction, we need to go back to the evolutionary roots of desire. The human brain, although capable of creating artificial intelligence, still operates with reward systems created in the Stone Age. For thousands of years, women needed to select partners based on two criteria: power and protection. The man who demonstrated social dominance, controlled aggression, and leadership ability was the one most suited to protect her and ensure the survival of their offspring. This hasn't disappeared, it has only changed its stage. Today, body language, tone of voice, the way a man enters a room, still communicates these traits. And the female body responds before the rational mind can edit. Psychologist Marty Haselton, from the University of California, demonstrated that women tend to feel more attracted to men with dominant traits during ovulation, even if they are in relationships with men considered good partners. This means that the hormonal cycle still unconsciously guides the preference for men with characteristics that signal strength, confidence, and unpredictability. And the more a woman is taught to deny this instinct, the more dangerous desire becomes, because it operates in the shadows. This division between discourse and attraction is visible in pop culture. Think of Twilight, a young, emotionally confused virgin, torn between two archetypes: the brutish wolf and the mysterious vampire. Both controlling, possessive, and dangerous. The world criticized it, but millions of women thrilled to the narrative. Not because they want to be dominated in real life, but because this type of man activates parts of the brain where logic doesn't enter. Similarly, the phenomenon of 50 Shades of Grey didn't explode because it's a romance about love. It's about control, surrender, and consensual domination. About a successful and rational woman being slowly disarmed by a man who doesn't ask permission. And this fantasy goes far beyond fiction. This is where the wound of modern man lies. He believes that being emotionally available is his main currency. That listening, validating, and being predictable will reward him with love and sex. But the reality is crueler. The man who only offers comfort rarely provokes excitement. Desire needs tension. Excitement needs unpredictability. A woman may love the one who understands her, but desire the one who destabilizes her. And in this paradox, the nice guy is discarded with affection, but discarded nonetheless. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard warned that we live in a society where discourse replaces experience. Applied to seduction, this means that what she declares she wants is a socially acceptable narrative, but one that doesn't necessarily reflect her real emotional experience. The woman who says she's looking for a sensitive partner may, at the same time, feel bored with men who bend easily. And here's the secret of great seducers. They don't argue with what she says, they speak to what she feels. Cleopatra, who seduced emperors with her presence, was not only beautiful, she was strategic. She knew when to be silent, when to provoke, when to disappear. She didn't explain what she wanted. She created emotional experiences that led the other person to want more. The seducer doesn't negotiate logic. He offers intensity. And that's what's missing in men who try to win in the field of attraction with arguments and good manners. They don't provoke emotion. They don't create history. They become what she forgets, while the other, the unpredictable, the magnetic, occupies an eternal space in her emotional memory. But this hypocrisy isn't an individual mistake. It's a cultural product. The modern woman has been taught to deny her own instincts to fit into empowerment narratives that ignore human nature. She feels desire for men she can't admit. And so she needs to camouflage this desire, to create moral justifications, to say she doesn't understand why she fell in love with that idiot. She does understand, but she can't admit it. Because if she admits it, she'll conflict with the image she's built for herself. On the other hand, the man who tries to be what she says she wants ends up betraying himself, and the desire dies. Because female desire is awakened by men who don't ask permission, who maintain the mystery, who aren't emotionally available all the time. The woman says she wants a man who communicates, but she gets excited by what he makes understood with his gaze. She says she wants security, but surrenders to the unpredictable. She says she wants equality, but melts at subtle signs of dominance. The contradiction is inevitable, because female desire isn't something that is declared. It's something you feel, and often hide. The modern woman lives divided between what the world expects her to desire, and what truly makes her heart race. And the more she tries to control it, the more she becomes trapped in lukewarm relationships, frustrating experiences, and repetitive cycles with men who treat her like a queen, but don't ignite any spark. Perhaps the most sincere question a man can ask isn't, "What do you want in a relationship?" but rather, "What can't you forget?" Because that's where the trace of true desire lies. In what marked her, in what hurt her, in what she misses. And almost always, that something has little to do with gentleness, and a lot to do with magnetism. This is the reality that nobody wants to expose, because it reveals that the game isn't fair, that love isn't rational, and that social rules serve more to protect egos than to explain truths. Female desire, contrary to what is taught out there, doesn't seek comfort, it seeks impact. And that's why the man who makes an impact, even if controversial, almost always wins. But what happens to the men who insist on listening to what she says and not observing her emotional responses? They become emotional tools, companions for venting, security during crises. Never the focus of desire. And when they finally realize this, they are already too emotionally invested. They have become invisible to the eyes of instinct. Understanding this is not about becoming a manipulator. It's about becoming free. It's about stepping out of the role of a disposable piece and becoming the player again. And the first move in this game begins by accepting a brutal truth. What she says is not a lie, but it's also not the whole truth. The truth lies in the silences, in the glances, in the unspoken desires. It's in the man who makes her feel, and not just think. Now that you know this, stop asking what she wants. Observe what excites her. Listen to her body, not her mouth. And understand, the modern woman lives in internal conflict between narrative and biology, and as long as this conflict exists, the man who knows how to operate between these layers will always hold the power. The prince died, and no one showed up for the funeral. The romantic, educated, available, emotionally accessible man was slowly removed from the scene. Not by patriarchal oppression, but by silent rejection. He was replaced by a new protagonist, the charming predator. The kind of man who doesn't apologize for his presence, who doesn't try to conquer through gentleness, but seduces through tension. He doesn't offer flowers, but creates fantasies. He doesn't send good morning messages, but occupies the female imagination with his absent presence. This new, shadowy hero is not what she claims to want. He is what her body silently begs for. And that's why he won. The prince's death was not natural. It was encouraged by decades of cultural narrative that encouraged men to suppress their impulses in the name of a misguided idea of acceptance. The good guy was taught to be understanding, emotionally vulnerable, to share fears, pains, traumas, to listen actively, to support without dominating, to be predictable, stable, transparent. All this while believing that this would bring her closer to true love. But love doesn't flourish in the absence of tension, and desire dies in the excess of predictability. The modern woman, bombarded by empowerment slogans and behavior manuals, found herself facing an impossible contradiction. The more she demanded a sensitive man, the more she found herself attracted to men who seemed insensitive. And this isn't her fault. It's a design flaw between instinct and ideology. Because desire, by its nature, rejects what is given completely. It is fueled by absence, by mystery, by challenge. The sensitive man gives everything, and desire evaporates. That's why seducers who understand the subtext of the female psyche abandon the Prince Charming figure. They understand that the behavior of the nice guy is often perceived as weak, not because he's kind, but because he's predictable, lacking magnetism. True attraction lies in the man who doesn't need approval, who doesn't bend, who imposes a presence. He doesn't please to be accepted. He seduces because he is self-sufficient. This emotional self-sufficiency, translated into silent security, is what transforms the predator into a symbol of excitement. But this modern predator is not the classic villain. He is refined. He knows how to speak, he knows how to listen, but he chooses not to give everything away. He is strategically opaque. His weapon is not violence but unpredictability. He can be kind, yes, but never too accessible. And unlike the prince who exposes his soul in exchange for affection, the predator reveals only fragments, enough to fascinate, never enough to satisfy. He understands a truth that the romantic man ignored. Female desire needs space to imagine. And there is no imagination without absence, without doubt, without the tension of what if. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, describes this type of man as the charming libertine. Someone who seduces naturally, without the need to promise paradise. He offers the present, not the future. And that disarms. Modern women, accustomed to men who try to anticipate their desires with prepared speeches, find in this type of man a freedom that excites them. They don't know what to expect, and the unknown is an aphrodisiac. The prince promised security. The predator offers intensity. This phenomenon is visible in every layer of culture. Observe the most watched series, the characters that inspire cult following. They are not the balanced ones, but the unstable, dangerous, intense ones. Men like Tommy Shelby, Peaky Blinders, Damon Salvatore, The Vampire Diaries, or even Joe Goldberg, who, despite being morally questionable, have become objects of collective desire. They are imperfect, yes, but they are fascinating, and fascination is the heart of desire. The point here isn't to defend abusive attitudes or toxic behaviors. It's to understand that female desire doesn't respond to obvious goodness, but to emotional intensity. And that many good men have become irrelevant, not because they are ethical, but because they are bland. The prince didn't lose ground for being decent, but for being forgettable. He fails to evoke emotion, and without emotion, there is no story. Without a story, there is no connection, and without emotional connection, there is no desire. The collapse of the prince is also explained by the saturation of the male discourse of validation. Modern man has been trained to constantly seek approval, to demonstrate vulnerability as a currency of affection, to share everything as a way to get closer. But in excess, this makes him needy, dependent, and female desire, however compassionate it may be, doesn't feed on neediness. It ignites in contrast, in the man who masters his own chaos, who carries shadows and doesn't need to display them, who selectively makes himself vulnerable, never to beg for connection, but to build tension. This tension is an essential ingredient. The seductive predator isn't a psychopath. He's someone who understands the psychology of desire. He knows that if he gives everything away, over-explains, constantly justifies himself, he transforms into an emotional servant. And servants aren't desired, they're used. The man who maintains power is the one who remains slightly out of reach, who reveals himself little by little, creating peaks of dopamine, expectation, frustration, and relief. He's not linear, he's a puzzle. Meanwhile, the prince, by trying to be too transparent, becomes an open book that nobody wants to reread. And here lies the fatal error. Believing that absolute transparency creates intimacy. It creates predictability, and desire dies when there's nothing left to discover. Historically, the figure of the seducer has always been shrouded in ambiguity. Don Juan, Casanova, Giacomo, none of them were described as trustworthy, but they all left legacies of fascination. Because they activated something that the common man didn't understand. Desire doesn't need logic, it needs contrast. The contrast between what one feels and what one allows, between fear and curiosity, between I know I should run away but I want to go all the way. It is precisely this internal conflict that the modern predator exploits, not with malice but with mastery of the game. He knows that the modern woman lives surrounded by options, distractions, promises, and speeches, but she lacks intensity. He offers presence, not advice. He creates silence and tension, not promises and guarantees. He appears and disappears with purpose. He leaves a mark, not because he begs for space, but because he leaves a trail. The prince tries to be forever. The predator becomes unforgettable. And, in this difference, lies the key to the new eroticism. On social media, where performance is valued more than essence, the prince doesn't stand out. The algorithm rewards impactful presence, an aesthetic of power, scarcity. The man who gives too much, comments too much, exposes himself too much, becomes a background character. The man who knows how to be a digital legend, who publishes little, speaks little, but appears with sharp aesthetics and sharp messages, attracts like a myth. Calculated absence is, today, more powerful than 1,000 declarations. And the most perverse aspect of this dynamic is that it's not rational. A woman may feel bad for desiring a man who doesn't treat her as a priority. But the truth is that he became a priority precisely because he didn't. Because desire is built on unresolved tension. And the more the prince tries to solve everything, explain, understand, align, the more he extinguishes the flame he should keep burning. This doesn't mean the woman is wrong. She is simply operating with a system of desire that has evolved to prioritize emotional impact over relational logic. And the man who understands this has two choices. Either he rebels against this truth and continues to be rejected, or he learns to operate with emotional intelligence, strategy, and narrative mastery. True power lies in knowing how to blend the two archetypes, being ethical like the prince, but magnetic like the predator, having values but maintaining mystery, having presence but cultivating scarcity, being vulnerable but never needy, being accessible but never predictable. This is the new irresistible man, the one who knows how to play with layers, who understands that desire is not commanded with words, but with presence, contrast, and tension. The prince fell because he tried to win through affection. The predator reigns because he masters emotion. And while the first waits to be chosen, the second is remembered, even when he is gone. Now imagine what happens when a man realizes he doesn't have to choose between being good or being desired. What can unite the two poles and operate as a silent magnetic force, one that doesn't justify itself, doesn't kneel but isn't cruel either, just strategically irresistible. That's the path to the next level. And that's what leads us to the heart of the enigma. Female desire isn't incoherent, it's complex. And only men who know how to navigate this complexity can break the cycle of rejection and enter the minds and bodies of women who say they want one thing, but dream of another. Ultimately, seduction is a silent battlefield where the rules that work are the ones no one dares to teach. And female desire, that visceral, contradictory, and powerful impulse, has never been about logic. It has always been about impact. The man who understood this stopped asking permission to be desired. He understood that a woman isn't looking for a prince who promises a happy ending, but rather a man who takes her off the script, who makes her feel what she can't name. That's exactly why the Forbidden Manual isn't just a provocative title. It carries the truth that many avoid. You don't conquer with effort. You awaken with presence. Real seduction happens in seconds, not in speeches. In tension, not in transparency. In silence, not in excessive words. And whoever masters this art doesn't need to be handsome, rich, or perfect. They need to be strategically irresistible. The era of the nice guy is over. The new man is a hybrid archetype, part shadow, part light, who understands that desire is born from mystery, grows in scarcity, and explodes in contrast. And if you're still playing the game based on what she says, you're losing to someone who understands what makes her feel. In today's world, it's not the one who shouts for attention who wins. It's the one who controls the subtext. The one who understands what she tries to hide from herself. And as the Forbidden Manual teaches, if you master the first 60 seconds, the rest is inevitable. The game isn't about conquering, it's about igniting. And now you know where the match is.